Hey everyone, Pastor George here, and you know that if it's a PowerPoint, it's gonna be a it's gonna be a long video. Yeah. So first of all, I just want to start this off by saying I didn't really want to talk about this at this point, largely because in our church already we're having some conversations about things that can be a little heated, a little divisive, and I don't really want to add fuel to that fire. However, I did promise all of you early on that if you sent me in questions, if you wanted to talk about something, we would talk about it because the church is a place where anything should be talked about and where God has an opinion on how we run our lives. And so I decided that, I might as well talk about it now. If I'm going to get fired anyway, why not get fired for multiple takes than just one? Although I don't think you guys are going to fire me, but whatever. If you do, you do. Oh well. Anyway, so this is a thing on abortion, and you're going to see out why I did this. Not only because people ask me, because sometimes if people ask me, I have to, say, well, we're not quite ready for that conversation yet, or let's put it back a little bit. But this time I had to do it, and you're going to see why I had to do it because the PCUSA asked me to do it. And so I am here to do this. And so I have entitled this little presentation, Abortion and Christianity, or Why the PCUSA Insists on Trying to be a Political Organization Instead of Just Following What the Bible Says. So let's dive into it, shall we? So last week, in the wake of what the Supreme Court said about this, the weak Supreme Court opinion, and I must say, again, this is very important for everyone involved to understand, that is not the final opinion of the court. It has probably been edited and changed. We can only guess as to why someone leaked it. We do not know, but it is not the final opinion of the court. So a lot of people are freaking out or celebrating or whatever, and I would say kind of hold your horses. I said that last week. I'm going to say it again now. You have to wait until the actual thing comes out before you do anything. But the PCUSA didn't want to wait. The PCUSA is an organization that I love in many ways, but also that I have grown to be very dissatisfied with. And I think many people can agree with that. And this is something that they posted on Facebook last week. And it says, this week, a draft from the Supreme Court of the United States overturning Roe v. Wade was leaked to the public, leaving many wondering what they can do to help. Here are just 7 things people of faith can do to continue the fight for reproductive health and justice in America. So this is clearly, I hope, if you do not know this, that this is clearly a political oriented post, and that's going to become very clear as we go through it, because we're going to go through each of the 7 things. Most of them are going to be like 5 seconds. Really, the first one is going to be where we spend most of our time today. And so I have to say that this is what ultimately spurred me to answer the questions that a few of you, not just one of you, a few of you sent in asking about abortion. And so here I am to talk about it. And we'll see how it goes. So these are the 7 things that you can do to fight for reproductive justice, according to the PCUSA. You'll notice that there's this organization called Unbound. That's a journal that is run by the PCUSA that talks about the intersection of faith and politics and kind of political life and justice advocacy and things like that. And you're going to know, and they're going to say this right off the bat. In fact, let's just move on to point 1, that the PCUSA takes a progressive stance towards abortion generally, and has since the 70s. And we're going to look at what the PCUSA has said. And this might shock some of you. Most people who aren't terminally plugged into the church like some of us are often surprised at the stances that our denomination has taken. Even if you happen to be in alignment with them, you might be surprised at the way that they phrase things or like where they go with things. And I do not think that it is wrong. Let me be very clear that a denomination takes a stance on the issue. I believe that the PCUSA stance is wrong, and I'm going to try and show this throughout this presentation, but that the PCUSA, I think at the upper levels, assumes all of its members agree with it and ends up putting things like this on Facebook, which end up alienating a large part of the church that disagrees with them. And I think that that is wrong. In the church, even if you want to give hard teaching, like I do sometimes, even if you want to disagree, then it's important to do that with the understanding that not most, but at least a decent portion of your people that are in your congregations, in your church, disagree with your position. And how you present that is very important. And the way that they present it here isn't very compelling. And as someone who disagrees, this is going to be difficult. By the way, I should say, if you happen to be watching this, I should have said this earlier, but it just came into my head. If you happen to be watching this and you are not a Christian, you might find some of the arguments here interesting, but I'm not going to try and convince non-Christians to be pro-life or whatever. This is solely to deal with in-house. So if you're going to listen to this as some sort of interest of like, why would, what's going on in the churches in the United States? Why is there division? Is there division even among, churches that are one way or the other? Then yeah, this might be an interesting thing, but I don't want to make you guys think that this is a evangelistic type of change your mind thing. It isn't really. Although if it does, great. All right, so let's look at this first one that I have up here. So it says spread the facts. Number one, first thing we can do is spread the facts. Though abortion has been clouded by religious-backed pro-life movements and rhetoric, data shows that many mainline and progressive denominations and churches are actually pro-choice. All right, so we're going to go into this a little bit about backed by pro-life movements and rhetoric, and that is true, right? I think like that the pro-life movement in the United States was quite small in the 1960s and stuff when abortion began to be legalized in some states, and then it exploded with Roe v. Wade because Roe v. Wade, and we're going to talk about what Roe v. Wade does in a little bit, made abortion legal in all states. Okay. And we're going to go more into that. So, and then it exploded. So, the abortion debate has always had a lot of pro-life rhetoric in it, at least for, almost 50 years at this point, it'll be 49. And so data shows that many mainline and progressive denominations and churches are actually pro-choice. And this is true. I mean, I don't even think you need data for this. You can actually just look at the statements that a lot of the churches put out, like this one from PCUSA, and you can find out that the churches are pro-life, but just or pro-choice rather. But just to reiterate, like, yeah, Pew does some good research here where it goes through different denominational things, and you'll see that people who tend to be in the mainline, while not being exceedingly pro-choice, tend to be more pro-choice than other groups of Christians in the United States. And so this is true, right? So this is kind of a showing that, yeah, there is a religious divide on this issue. Now, is it a big religious divide? I would say no. I would say the majority of Christians and stances by Christian bodies in the United States are pro-life, and the pro-choice are in a very vast minority. But we'll get into majority minority in a little bit. So that's what that has to do with this. So they then go on, they say this includes the policies of the Presbyterian Church USA, which is our denomination. And then they add this, which I think is actually very troubling. Plus, the majority of the American people want to keep Roe v. Wade. Okay? So imagine this. Imagine we were having a conversation. And let's say, because this is actually related to this, that we as Christians in the first century think that leaving babies to die is wrong on the side of the road. Right? You and I we're both Christians. I assume most people who wrote this would believe that's evil. Let's hope. And we would say that. And then someone came up to us and said, actually, stupid Christians, did you know the majority of the Roman Empire believes it's totally fine to leave your baby to die on the side of the road? That's true. That's actually true. That most Romans, that was completely normal and is still completely normal in many societies. Would you take that as a good argument? Of course you wouldn't. None of us should. Even if it was the opposite side. Even if I went, most Americans are pro-life, therefore you should be pro-life too. That is never a good argument because people can be wrong. People are sinners. People cover up terrible things that they do. The fact that a majority of people support something does not make it right. It does not make it wrong. What makes it wrong or right is if it is in accordance with Scripture, right? And the interpretation of that. So that I thought is nuts that they put that there, because imagine how many things that the PCUSA supports most Americans do not support. and then using that argument. So it's very unfortunate that they did that. And then you have this last part, which again seems like a good smart thing to say, but actually isn't. Again, when you apply it widely, banning abortions will not stop abortions. It will only stop safe abortions. Now, this may be true. Depends how you classify safe. Of course, many pro-life people would say, like myself, that the baby is a life and it's not safe for the baby. But just caring about the mother, then yeah, they're mostly safe. But at the same time, this is, again, like saying banning theft won't stop theft. So what's the point? Our laws are moral laws. All laws are moral laws. And if we are going to take a stance as a country one way or another, we're putting our foot in that camp, understanding that even if people break it, that there are going to be people that break it, but that they're wrong to do so. So those two aren't religious arguments at the end. Those are just more like logical arguments. But let's go into what the PCUSA has to say. So this is the position of the PCUSA. You can find this because I cite my sources on the presbyterianmission.org site. I will also include a list of these in the description if you want to go look at them yourself. This is just a small grab from this. There's more to say. So here's what the PCUSA says. The considered decision of a woman to terminate a pregnancy can be a morally acceptable, though certainly not the only or required decision. Possible justifying circumstances would include medical indications of severe physical or mental deformity, conception as a result of rape or incest, or conditions under which the physical or mental health of either the woman or the child would be gravely threatened. We are disturbed by abortions that seem to be elected only as convenience or ease embarrassment. We affirm that abortion should not be used as a method of birth control. Abortion is not morally acceptable for gender selection only or solely to obtain fetal parts for transplantation. The strong Christian presumption is that since all life is precious to God, we are to preserve and protect it. Abortion ought to be an option of last resort. All right, so there are, like, on the surface, I think actually most people in the United States would agree with this. And I think that, given these things, right, when we think of the things that have to do with abortion here, right, we usually go to these cases like severe physical or mental deformity of the child, right? Do we bring something into the world if it will be so hurt? Conception as a result of rape or incest, terrible, evil things to happen. Forcing a woman to go through with that is brutal, right? Mentally, I know, like, I don't know personally, but you're going to see kind of how I know in a little bit, but let's just assume that I can kind of understand that. Or conditions which the physical or mental health of either the woman or the child would be gravely threatened. Now, I think that last part, the one problem I have with that is it's very open. What do you mean by mental health or physical health? I think that a lot of Americans actually have a lot of problem with that, and we're going to see that in a little bit. But let's just assume that they're meaning like severe things, and I think most Americans would agree with that as well. And then the PCUSA goes on and they say they're disturbed by abortions that seem to be elected only as convenience and ease of embarrassment, and that it should not be a method of birth control, and that it shouldn't be done for gender selection or to obtain fetal parts for transplantation. All that's good. And they also say this, and this is true, we're going to get into this a little bit, that Christians have a right to protect life, a presumption that all life is precious, right? Doesn't matter how small, all life is precious to God. And so most of this would be acceptable. But as you know, they're very concerned with facts, and so I think it's important to bring some facts to our attention. And when we think about these things, when we think about abortion, the debates usually revolve around these really, and I'm going to say it now, fringe issues. And that isn't me just saying that. That's actually true. So the amount of abortions that are done in the United States is about, like, for reasons are 0.3% for rape, 0.03% for incest, 0.1% for the physical life of the mother, 0.8% for the physical health of the mother, 0.5% for fetal health. That means like something wrong with the child, right? The mental health of the mother, which statistics will vary on that, but it's either 0.1 to 0.8%. And then you can see elective, 98.3%. And with a range of 87 to 99% of error there. So this comes from a Johnson archive, and Johnson archive is just this absolutely nuts statistical platform on all sorts of things. And I think it's like some guy that just collects it. If you go to his website, it looks like it's out of 1996. But he cites all of his sources there, so you can actually take a look at it. I'll leave that in the description as well. Now, as you can see, 98.3% of all abortions in the United States are as a method of birth control. They are elective, and they are done for reasons that are birth control reasons, right? The reason you would wear a condom, the reason that you would get an IUD, the reason that you would do all these other things. Now, if we agreed, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but let's just say I do, if we agreed that all babies conceived in rape and incest we had the right to kill them, then you and I, or for physical health, other physical fetal health, we would eliminate 98% of all abortion in the United States, like that. And most people don't realize that. Most people go to these really fringe cases first. And I think that we need to be very cautious with that, and pay attention to the way that we talk about things, which the PCUSA doesn't. And we're going to talk about that. This is mostly political, and that'll become clear moving forward. More from the PCUSA. There is both agreement and disagreement on the basic issue of abortion. The Committee on Problematic Pregnancies and Abortion agreed that there are no biblical texts that speak expressly to the topic of abortion, but that taken in their totality, the Holy Scriptures are filled with a message that advocate respect for the woman and child before and after birth. Therefore, the Presbyterian Church USA encourages an atmosphere of open debate and mutual respect for a variety of opinions concerning the issues related to a problem, pregnancies, and abortion. And so here you can see that they actually say that there are no biblical texts that expressly speak to the topic of abortion. And that's true. Like, there is no text that says abortion is wrong or anything like that. And I think they are also right in saying that the totality of the Holy Scriptures are filled with messages that advocate respect for women and child before and after birth. However, I do think that there are texts that can point us in certain directions, but we'll get into that in a little bit. They have another claim. Early in that, they'll say, moreover, most Americans are pro Roe v. Wade. Now, I've already pointed out that that's not a good argument for making any sort of moral or Christian case, but I actually just wanted to talk about that real quickly. Most Americans are pro-choice, but the understanding of what that is varies very wildly between people. And also, most people don't understand what Roe v. Wade does. So most people think that Roe v. Wade made abortion legal in the United States. It did not. There were some states where it was already legal. What Roe v. Wade did, in short, I could make a whole video if anyone wants to ask questions about longer. What Roe v. Wade did in essence is that it expanded it made abortion legal in every state in the United States, right? Roe was in Texas. Texas had no abortions allowed law. And she said, I want an abortion, sued, right? Went all the way to Supreme Court. Supreme Court struck down Texas's law, made abortion legal in all the states. Now, when you actually bring that fact to people, most people are comfortable with the fact that their state gets to decide what to do. For instance, earlier this year, whether or not you know this, New Jersey made it legal for abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, which is wildly out of step with Americans, and you'll see that in this case. Now, does that make it wrong? Of course not. But if we're going to talk about how most Americans are something, we should actually know what that something is. And it doesn't mean that what most people think it means, which is that they're, totally fine with it. Actually, most Americans are for restrictions after a certain period of time. And that certain period of time tends to be around the first trimester. And usually after that, the restrictions begin to become more and more. And so on the left here, this is from Pew on the left, and Pew shows that these are the things. And so you can see that at 6 weeks, right, most Americans are in favor of keeping it legal. But then when you hit 14 weeks, you start to see a lot more gray area pop up, right? A lot more gray area. And then you actually see it shifts towards most people don't want it there anymore. And then you hit 24 weeks, and it's a vast majority of Americans who think that it's wrong to do it. And then on the right here, this is from the Kauffman Center. And in this, this is some people who support things, support certain abortion laws. And you can actually see that most Republicans, which isn't a surprise, right? Because Republicans are always seen as pro-life, but independents actually support quite what I would call drastic pro-life laws. So as you can see, the laws that some states have where it says requiring women to wait 24 hours between meeting with a healthcare provider and getting an abortion, you can see that 50% of Democrats support that, which is interesting, but also 70% of independents and 86% of Republicans. Let's just kick the Republicans out because they're gonna support anything. It doesn't matter. Let's just focus on the independents really. Requiring abortions to only be performed by doctors. 72% of independents report that, which is not actually pro-choice thinks that should go. Many more radical, I would say, pro-choice people believe that like nurse practitioners should be able to perform abortions and things. And then requiring doctors to show and describe ultrasound images to women seeking an abortion. That's 61% of independents. And then you have 49% of independents who want to prohibit once cardiac activity is detected. That's the heartbeat. And that's 6 weeks, just in case anyone doesn't know that. Most Americans are against making it a crime of all the stripes for women to procure an abortion. Most Republicans are in favor of punishing doctors who break the law. And so that's kind of just a basic thing. But you'll actually see saying something like most Americans are pro-choice is not quite accurate, because what they're going to argue, or what they're arguing, is that most people support our position, which is a very radical one, whereas most people really just want it with restrictions. And it's on our side, people like me who are pro-life, to convince you guys to push that back all the way to conception. But that's not quite what this is about. This is just rebutting the PCUSA. Now let's talk about the Bible. So they said the Bible doesn't have a lot to say on it, and I agree. And not that they don't have a lot to say. It doesn't have anything explicit. Biblical texts, right? A sampling, just 2 of them. There are other ways to do this, but send me questions, send me things if you want to talk about certain texts. So it doesn't speak directly to abortion, but we do know that God values the life of the child. In this. So Exodus 21, some of you might remember my Exodus Bible study, we went through not all the laws, but we went through a bunch of laws. And this is what Exodus 21 says. It says, if people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise, right? So this is like the law at the time of Exodus. And this, I believe, and we're going to talk about that there might be disagreement here. I believe that this covers not only because it shows that she gives life prematurely, but there's no serious injury, right? That she gave birth, but that the baby doesn't die. That it's, the offender is just fined. But if the woman dies or the baby dies, the person who hit her and causes this gets killed, right? It suffers capital punishment for it. Of course, then you see this one all the time. This is like one of the big pro-life verses, right? From Psalm 139, 13 through 16. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Right? It's talking about God's sovereignty here and how he forms us ever since we are just embryos into, of course, they wouldn't have understood this in the sense of scientific, but right from our earliest stages to our last stages, God walks alongside of us. And so it shows that God values life before it comes into the world through the birth canal and up until death, right? The value on life is very high in the Bible, which is very not normal in that world. But these 2 texts cannot make that argument home. And I think that a lot of people go there. And even in Exodus 21, right? You could debate me on that. You could say, really, does it really mean the life of the child as well, or does it really mean the life of the mother? And I think that's a fair argument to make. So I think the best thing to do when we have this, and some of you might remember this, is that we have the George Erlinson hermeneutical system, right? And what this is we go to, this is my own system, although this has been done by other people, is we go to the Bible, right? We look at the text. What does the text mean? And then we can apply it into our life. But sometimes it's difficult, right? Sometimes we look at something like Exodus 21 and we go, man, I don't know what to make of that. So where should I go next? Well, next we go to the church, and we see the tradition of the church and how it has interpreted these things and the stances that it has taken. And we're going to go from our time in reverse. So we talked about the PCUSA, and of course, any of you can look up any sort of position now. We're not going to focus on Christian positions now on abortion. As I said, if you go to most churches in the United States, most of them are pro-life at the organizational level, of course, and then you have a few that are pro-choice. So then we look at the church tradition, and so let's do that. So we're going to work backwards. So we're going to start with the Reformation. We got my boy Calvin and Luther here, and this is what they have to say. So Calvin writes this, and he's writing this about this verse that we just looked at from Exodus 21. He says, "The unborn, though enclosed in the womb of his mother, is already a human being, and it is almost an almost monstrous crime to rob it of life which has not yet begun to enjoy. If it seems more horrible to kill a man in his own house than in a field, because a man's house is his most secure place of refuge, it ought surely to be deemed more atrocious to destroy the unborn in the womb before it has come to light." So about as long as there has been humanity, there's been abortion. And I think that you're going to find this to be the case. It is not something that is new. And so even the Reformation, reformers, the church throughout all times and places has had to continually tell people not to do it. And so Calvin here is taking, a very, what we would say, a pro-life stance. And then Luther says this in his commentary on Genesis. He says, "How great, therefore, the wickedness of human nature is. How many girls there are who prevent conception and kill and expel tender fetuses, although procreation is the work of God. Indeed, some spouses who marry and live together in a respectable manner have various ends in mind, but rarely children. The God who declares that we are to be fruitful and multiply regards it as a great evil when human beings destroy their offspring." So there you have Martin Luther talking about the very same thing. And he says that it is wrong to do this. And so you have, again, not an exhaustive sample, but two guys from the Reformation and what they think on the matter, which I think is important, especially for us Reformed people who are staunchly in Calvin's camp to at least care what he had to say, even if you disagree. And we're going to talk about disagreement at the end. Then we have medieval theology, and this is actually brought up a lot. You'll be watching like Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, and you'll see people arguing abortion in the worst ways possible, obviously, with no nuance or anything like that. And a lot of people will bring up quickening. They'll say, oh, well, the stance on pro-life has changed because, it used to believe that it was the quickening. So what is the quickening? Well, the quickening is a term that was used by the church in the Middle Ages. And that guy on the right there is Thomas Aquinas, who's a big theologian. And the idea here with the quickening is that is when the child begins to move. And that was what they believed, that it becomes ensouled, right? That the child is alive in the human sense of having a soul. And so people believe that once you kill the baby at that point, that it was murder. And so a lot of people will say, well, see, it's changed. It used to be when it was there, now it's back at conception. That doesn't really make sense, right? Now, part of that is just because they didn't understand how biology worked, right? My guess is if you gave them this, and this has been the Catholic Church's updating of this position to today, is that if you can understand how human life is formed, then you're going to make it all the way back to conception. So Thomas Aquinas believed that the quickening is the moment when it becomes murder to kill the child, when it starts moving around. Although in his discourses, he still believes it is wrong to do it before that. So it's not as though it's just not murder. It's still an evil, but not an evil, not murder. And then you have people who even disagree with him during that same period. You have Pope Stephen V and Pope Sixtus V opposed abortion at any stage as well. So again, you have a very consistent line here. But let's go back further, because as we know, things can come into the church. So it's important to go all the way back, see as far back as we can go when it comes to takes on issues, right? So we can understand where we can plant ourselves. Classical theology. This is from Augustine of Hippo. He says, "Sometimes indeed this lustful cruelty, or if you please, cruel lust, resorts to such extravagant methods as to use poisonous drugs to secure barrenness, or else, if unsuccessful in this, to destroy the conceived seed by some means previous to birth, preferring that its offspring should rather perish than receive vitality, or if it was advancing to life within the womb, should be slain before it was born." And that's Augustine. This is the 300s or 400s, right? So this is way far back. This is almost 1,000 years before Aquinas. So we're really jumping around here. But this is Augustine in his De Nube et Concupiscentia discourse. And here he's talking about abortion, and you can see again that he is against it. But here's the kicker, right? The next one is the big one, and I think seals the deal as far as the church's opinion on this. We've gone back pretty far, and now we're going to go back to the 1st century with something that is called the Didache. Now, the Didache, for those of you who do not know, is one of the oldest Christian documents that we have, and the Didache means the teaching, and it is the teaching of the apostles as preserved, and it kind of serves as a very early, if you want to call it, like a catechism almost, or a confession. And this is really important because for lots of reasons. Like, you can just read it. Like, I'm gonna link it below. Read the Didache. It's really interesting for not just this teaching, but just like all the sorts of things. And you can see how early Christian theology was lined up with what we have, and it's been real interesting to see scholars kind of deal with this. It was found almost really recently. It actually was kind of lost for centuries, millennia, and then rediscovered. And so it's been really cool. But the Didache actually does comment on abortion, and here's what it says. And you can actually see other things that were really important to the early church and how it took stances against the culture that were not popular. So let's see this. So this is what the Didache says in it. It says, and the second commandment of the teaching, that's what they called Christianity, was the teaching, right? The teaching of the apostles. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not commit pederasty. That's the Greek practice of having sex with prepubescent boys or early puberty boys. You shall not commit fornication. You shall not steal. You shall not practice magic. You shall not practice witchcraft. You shall not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that which is begotten. Kill that which is begotten is the practice of leaving them on the roadside. You shall not covet the things of your neighbor. You shall not forswear yourself. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not speak evil. You shall not bear no grudge. You shall not be double-minded nor double-tongued, for to be double-tongued is a snare of death. Your speech shall not be false nor empty, but fulfilled by deed. You shall not be covetous, nor rapacious, nor hypocrite, nor evil disposed, nor haughty. You shall not take evil counsel against your neighbor. You shall not hate any man. But some of you shall reprove, and concerning some you shall pray, and some you shall love more than your own life. Right? It's actually really beautiful. And there you have a teaching, right? You shall not shall not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that which is begotten. Now, even if you want to put this at a later date, let's say you want to put it at the early 100s, 110, right? 2nd century. That's still really early. This is very early Christian belief and teaching on this issue, and it is not unequivocal, right? It is very clear what the church has taught about this. And that is because they looked at texts like the one before. They looked at things that were coming out of their own Jewish context at the time, and they said, this has been the teaching. This has been the teaching from the time of Moses. This has been what Christ affirmed, and this is what the church now demands of its followers, right? All right, so that's been a history of it, not exhaustive. We can go into more. Feel free to do it, but we have 6 more points to go, but this is going to be quick. We're going to shoot through these. That section was the longest because that's where most of the meat of all this, because that first point is what sets up all these other ones. So number 2, donate to local health clinics. Many reproductive health clinics are supported through donations. Research your local clinics and help them financially. Other social justice organizations such as Sister Song not only promote reproductive justice, but also the education and continued work of protecting the civil right of Wompsin girls and femmes of color. Now, this is usually framed, I don't like framing this particular debate as a gender issue. I don't think it's very helpful. But if we must, I think it is important for women to realize how these people talk about you. I think it's important to realize the words that people use. That woman XN thing, it comes straight out of academia, comes straight out of ivory tower philosophy. And it's just a way of writing women by cutting the men out of it. Right, that's what that X is. And so basically the point is just to say that women, however you identify, are all women, and like that we are women as opposed to men, right? To get men out of the equation completely. Very important that you recognize that. But let me look at this. Donate to local health clinics. So this would be like donating to Planned Parenthood, donating things like that. Now, I think as Christians, we, regardless of your pro-choice or pro-life, I think there are better places to donate to. In fact, I would say that these places are actually, maybe not neutral. That'd be too strong because they do try to steer people away from abortion. But I think that as Christians, even if you say, well, all these guys, right, from the Didache to Calvin are wrong, right? Abortion is acceptable under certain circumstances. I think it would be almost impossible for to argue that we should not try to do anything not try to do anything else before doing that, right? It should clearly be a last attempt thing, even though that's not how most people use it. So I would suggest, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, to donate to local crisis pregnancy centers. And I just did this on Google Maps. I personally choose to support Life Choices Resource Center in Metuchen, but any of you can do any of these. These other ones, do your research, things like that, and feel free to donate to these. Even if you're pro-choice, I think we should, as Christians, be against abortion unless I don't believe this, but if you're going to say it's necessary, unless it's necessary, and that most aren't. And so we should try and reduce the amount of that by as much as possible. So but do the opposite. Don't donate to places that do it. Donate to places that try to prevent it. Accompaniment, point 3. People who need reproductive health care are sometimes alone, scared, and often shamed by family, protesters, and yes, church members. Volunteer and train to accompany someone as they are making their way to a clinic or join a group that offers this service to people seeking care. Your presence can make all the difference. This I will agree with, a part of it. People who need reproductive care, right? In this case, people who are pregnant, women who are pregnant, are oftentimes scared, alone, and shamed by family, protesters, and yes, the church. 100%. 100% this happens all the time, and that is bad, right? We can understand why some people would be shamed by this, right? Your daughter gets pregnant out of wedlock. That can be a shameful thing for someone in the family, right? That, as Christians, it should not be our response. Our response should always be in love towards people and trying to understand their situations. Now, I again think it is wrong for us to take this stance of the church and then say, but then, help them do something that we think is morally evil. This is, again, why I would point you to these places. Get involved there. Lots of these places have counseling centers. They do all sorts of awesome work when it comes to supporting women after. One of the arguments that never flies with me is you'll see lots of people say you're only pro-life before it gets out. You can go to any of these places and you're going to see that is completely and utterly wrong. These places support mothers through many early years of pregnancy with diapers, with formula, although formula is hard to get right now, and lots of other things. So I do not brook that argument. So don't use that on me if you're going to do it. So yeah, accompany them, walk alongside these people. Don't take them to bad and evil places. Number 4, churches speak up. And this is where the person grinding their hands right now and saying, Pastor George, why are you doing that? Why are you talking about this? This is not something the church should speak about. You should not be talking about this. Well, you can only blame the PCUSA. Point 4, churches speak up. People of faith that advocate for reproductive health and justice need to find ways to magnify their voices and to not be afraid to do so. Sermons, live streams, and social media, podcasts, and other forms of media can help in advocating for reproductive rights. I'm here advocating the opposite because I think they're wrong, but I was told to do it. So you can only blame them. 5, think creatively. The overturning of Roe v. Wade would immediately enact trigger laws in states like Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, banning abortion there. Many women and people who need reproductive care in those states may need help in transportation, housing, assistance, and other needs as they make their way to get the care they need. So again, do this, but the opposite. It's true that this would enact trigger laws. Lots of these states have set up laws that if Roe v. Wade was overturned, the status quo ante, which is just that what it was before, would go into effect. And so where it was banned, like Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, it would go back to being banned. You might think that this shouldn't be a states' rights issue. Most Americans think the opposite. They think that it's fine if states decide. But again, that doesn't make it right. But just remember that because apparently that matters. And so just do this, but do the opposite of it. Bring them. Use assistance, use church things to help care, and that's important. Support pro-choice candidates. Now, this one is interesting because I actually think that this might be a violation of the law for them to say this. I have to redo this, but it says support pro-choice candidates. The midterms have started. It is a political season, and it's important that people of faith are engaged with candidates who support reproductive health. That means local, state, and federal candidates who can make the difference. The more pro-productive health candidates, the easier it would be to codify Roe v. Wade. Call your representatives and advocate for the Women's Health Protections Act of 2021. So what they mean, just to clarify, by codifying Roe v. Wade is it actually isn't a federal law for abortion, right? There is none. I mean, there are several ancillary ones, but not like to make it legal everywhere. And so what they want is they want enough candidates to come in to win who are pro-choice and then codify it into law and keep it protected, right? Although that would most certainly be challenged in the Supreme Court, but whatever. The reason I say this might be illegal is because 401c3s like the PCUSA, at least ostensibly, cannot say that you should support or be against certain candidates. At least that's how it usually is. There's usually a lot of leeway here. So my guess is that they had a team of lawyers run through this and say it was okay. So, but I just know that a lot of churches have gotten sued for stuff like this. This is why you can't really have like a candidate come to speak at a church meeting, right? That would be a violation, that bridging of state and church and state that the United States has set up. So this is really interesting. Regardless, as someone who is pro-life, do the opposite. All right, prayer is an action verb. And this is something, I guess this is the best one because this is something that I can agree with completely. Never underestimate the power of prayer. As people of faith, we must understand that there is no belief in Jesus that does not contain a component of commitment to justice. God cares about these issues, and our prayers are important. We pray in our private time with God, and we pray in public with our actions towards fairness for all. Both are important and necessary. True. I think this is definitely true, and I think that we should pray. We should pray for abortion to be no more, and that this is something that is that God is deeply and gravely concerned about, and that the church has been deeply and gravely concerned about for its 2,000 years, and even before that in the times of Israel and things like that. And so I think this is important. Yeah, it's important to pray in our private time, and it's important to go out there and make a difference. And I think you should do that. Now, and this is from Unbound. This just list was created by Unbound team in conjunction with the Office of Gender and Racial Justice of the PCUSA. Learn more at justiceunbound.org. Obviously, go check them out if you want. You can see the other stances that they take on all sorts of other issues. It's important to know kind of what organs of our denomination believe about certain things. Now, I want to be clear here that I believe, and I think this is clear already, but I'll say it again, that I believe abortion is wrong and that it is evil. And I take that all the way to the point of conception. And I understand that in our society, many people, many women have had abortions. And many people have supported other people having abortions, and I think that is an evil thing. But I want to be very clear here that I do not say this out of a place of high and mighty judgment. I do not say it out of a place of not understanding where you have been or what you have done or anything like that, right? I've volunteered with crisis pregnancy centers and things like that, talked with many women, and the absolute struggle and difficulty that it has is real. And I want to affirm that. The stories that you hear are difficult to hear. But we also, as Christians, need to take a very firm stance when something is wrong, and if two wrongs make a right. And I would say they do not. But I also want to say that, if you are feeling something about this and maybe you think that you've been wrong in the past, even in support of things like this, I want to tell you that you are not lost. You are not somehow deficient in the sense of being worse or more evil than anyone else, because Jesus Christ died for all of us on the cross. For every evil thing that was ever committed, Jesus was there. And took our punishment for us if we trust in him. And so I want to remind us of this quotation from, it says Romans 6, chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. And in this, Paul is saying, he says, "You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person someone might dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." So here we have Paul affirming that Jesus died for us even when we were doing evil things. And this can be for anything. And I would encourage you, not just on this issue, but on all issues, to remember and keep yourself humble when it comes to talking about these things, remembering that we are all sinners, that we have all fallen short of the glory of God, and that we all deserve the cross for the evil that we have done. But Jesus has stepped in and taken that position for us, and thanks be to God for that. That he valued life so much that he gave up his own to give us it eternally, and that's just amazing. So in summary, right, Christianity has always stood against abortion, not only as a moral stance gleaned from Scripture, but from the wide consensus of the church. And now we get to this point, and I think this is important. And I appreciate if you've stuck with me this whole time and you disagree with me. If you disagree, that is acceptable, at least within the PCUSA guidelines, right? God alone is Lord of the conscience. But I would argue that if you're going to talk about these things like this group did, Unbound, you need better and more scripturally based arguments. If you go back and you look through all of these, do you see a mention of any religious stuff? And this is kind of my final point here. Seriously consider whether or not you want to pay your per capita next year. I will. The per capita is something that we as members pay every year in order to keep the upkeep of the denomination going. I am seriously considering not paying mine next year because I do not think that the PCUSA should be taking stances like this. And so I think that we should, as members of this church, seriously consider whether or not we want to pay it. And I'm a big per capita hawk, so that might shock some people. I think it's really important. But as the PCUSA continues to describe itself and go in a political and not a religious direction, my conscience is becoming very troubled by paying it. So I think it's important that if they must learn, they learn the hard way through the striving and cutting off of their funds. So that is what I have to say on this issue. I know that this has been a long video, but I think it's been an important one. I know that this may be an issue that you and I disagree on, and that's fine. You can come speak to me about it. I'd love to talk about it with you. I'd love to have a class on it if you want. But I think like this is something that, regardless, I think both of us could agree on, no matter what, that as Christians, we have a duty to protect life, and that the church has understood this in a very certain way when it comes to the abortion issue. And even if you disagree with me there, we should still try to minimize these things as much as possible and not try to expand it more and more as some people wish us to do. So I think that we should be clear and that we should not let our politics muddy our religious principles, that we should rather let our politics be guided by our religious principles. So all that being said, wow, what a mailbag. What a thing. I will see you guys on Sunday for our continuing series on sex. And I look forward to getting some responses. Like, if you want to write me back about this, please do. Please engage with me if you wish. If not, that's fine. I'll put my email in the description below. If you'd rather talk to me in person, that's cool too. And I look forward to seeing you all next week for hopefully much less spicy mailbags and theologs and stuff like that. So you guys have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Peace out.